Somalia is a name which has unfortunately become synonymous with failed state. It's a nation with extremely high levels of poverty, one whose government is barely existent, and notably it's a country racked with violence. But how did this come to be? Why did Somalia fail? So, as of 1945, Somalia, like most of Africa, was under European control. It was divided into two areas, British Somaliland in the north and Somalia to the south and east. This was also run by Britain at this point, who had taken it from Italy in the Second World War. Now, Britain's first instinct was to ask the brand new UN, maybe we could keep it, but the Somali people were pretty sick of Europeans and the UN said no. And thus, it was run by the British, who allowed for the establishment of political parties, and under orders from the UN it was passed back to Italy in 1950, on the sole condition that they give it independence within 10 years. And in 1960, both the British and Italian Somalilands were given independence, and very soon afterwards they united into the Somali Republic. At first, the Republic functioned well. The people of Somalia had free elections, freedom of speech, and the economy was growing. However, there were two major issues which plagued the Somali Republic. The first was that politics was dominated by the deeply entrenched clan system and as a result became fairly partisan. And the second was the idea of Greater Somalia. These lands were home to some and often a majority Somali population, and many in government were divided on whether or not to push for territorial expansion or to simply let things lie. This question wouldn't get answered anytime soon, since this was the Cold War, and 1969 meant that it was time for a communist revolution. A man called Mohammed Siad Barre, with the help of some of the army, seized control of the country and began to implement wide-sweeping reforms. Things were going pretty well, right? Well, yes, except for the fact that Barre had a clever idea in 1977, let's invade Ethiopia, specifically to gain this region called the Ogaden and incorporate it and the Somalis living there into Somalia proper. And with the help of the USSR, it would be simple. Or at least that it would have been, barring the fact that the Soviet Union didn't approve and so aided Ethiopia along with a large number of Cuban troops. The war went poorly for Somalia, and by 1978 it had lost, and many Somalis living in eastern Ethiopia fled for Somalia. Within the space of a year, Somalia's population went from just under 4 million to over 5 million. And as you'll have guessed, this caused issues with infrastructure and food supply, and the national humiliation of losing a war caused major discontent in Barre's regime. There was an attempted coup and a harsh crackdown that followed, in which Barre focused on certain clans. To make matters worse, Somalia's food and water supply had begun to collapse, and so it was reliant on foreign aid, which Barre only gave to clans which supported him. Over the course of the 1980s, Somalia grew worse. The economy entered freefall, and Barre's government became much more brutal in suppressing any challenge to its authority. This led to growing armed resistance by the sidelined clans, and by 1990, civil war. Most of Somalia fell to the rebels pretty quickly, and by 1991 Barre had fled the country, never to return, and also northern lands here declared independence as the Republic of Somaliland. And whilst many clans had put aside their differences to oust Barre, now that he was gone there was nothing keeping them together, and so, civil war. Again. Or still. As you all know, things didn't get much better after this. American and UN intervention did nothing to help, and Somalia's state only got worse. Law and order had completely broken down, meaning jobs that provided food were no longer safe and meant controlling aid was the quickest route to power, meaning that Somalia was never given the opportunity to get back on its feet.